Hi, Andy.
Hey, all right, we're gonna get started. I hope everybody's having a good day so far. And for those of everybody who lives in, I guess, Fairfax and Loudoun, if you have kids, I hope your first week in school is going well. I know it's been an adventure. Thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. I love talking about adventure racing, and we're gonna do a couple different things. I'm going to share my screen and show you the agenda and kind of give you a preview of what we're going to talk about. And then you can kind of decide how long you want to stay. So let's see. Can everybody see my screen? Yeah, somebody give me a thumbs up. Good. All right, cool.
Good.
All right, so here is our agenda. So I'm going to tell you very, very briefly about who EX2 is, what VentureQuest is, and then a little bit about my background. And then we're going to talk specifically about logistics for this year's VentureQuest. So we'll talk about how we're going to do map pickup for the in-person race, how we're going to do staggered starts, some COVID precautions, equipment that we're providing and stuff that you guys have to bring. I'll tell you a little bit about the course itself, maybe even give you a few hints. And then I'll talk about some of the differences between the in-person, like real course that we're going to run on September 20th, and then how is that going to be different from the quote unquote on your own version that we're running from the Monday, which is September 21st through the 27th. So that'll be kind of the first part. And then after that, I'm going to go into more of a sort of a generic adventure racing clinic. So some of you may or may not be interested in that. If you're interested in that, stick around. And I'll tell you about where adventure racing came from, some race formats and some disciplines, what makes an adventure race, basically. I'll talk about rules of travel and maps in a little bit more detail than what I'm going to cover with kind of in the first part. I'll talk about gear and answer questions that you guys might have and give you some real life examples of stuff that I've used over the years. I'll teach you how to not orienting your compass. I'll teach you how to orient your compass, which I think is the single most important skill that every single person in the whole world should know how to do, but very important for adventure racing. We'll look at some maps. So I have some maps that will actually, I'll pull up on my screen and we'll talk about them. I'll talk about teamwork and then I'll give you some ideas on where to look for more information. So some resources. Sound okay? So again, the first part is specifically about this year's VentureQuest, and then the second part is sort of more generic adventure racing. Now, if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I will be monitoring that as best I can. I have muted everybody, so if you would just kind of keep yourself muted, that would be awesome, and use the chat box to answer questions. All right, so Mark Montague, you give me a thumbs up if that sounds okay with you? Awesome, cool. All right. So very, very briefly about EX2. So EX2, we've been around, this is our 20th anniversary. We picked a heck of a year to have our 20th anniversary. And VentureQuest was actually the first race ever that Jim Harmon, who is the gentleman who started EX2 way back when, put on. VentureQuest is our longest running event. This will be our 14th edition of VentureQuest. The first one was run out of Hemlock Overlook, and then it spent a lot of time at Fountainhead Regional Park over in Fairfax Station. And then last year, I moved it to the Mason Neck Peninsula and running out of Pohick Bay. And so this is the second year that we've run it out of the Pohick area. I think next year we're going to keep it at Pohick. I have lots of interesting ideas on different places to explore. This year, I couldn't do everything I wanted because some things were closed and kind of the weirdness of COVID. But if you've never been to the Mason Neck Peninsula before, just know that there's some really, really cool stuff to explore. And we'll be going back for at least one more edition of VentureQuest in 2021. So my background, so I've been the race director and owner of EX2 for the past 3 years. Adventure racing is near and dear to my heart. I started adventure racing back in 2006. What got me into it really was complete luck. I was getting into some running and some off-road triathlon, doing Xterra races. And randomly, I got asked to do a 24-hour adventure race back in 2006 by my girlfriend at the time's co-worker's husband. And so Josh Jacobs asked me to do an adventure race. I had no idea what I was doing, no idea what I was getting myself into, but it spurred off something that's changed my life. I spent the better part of since then learning about adventure racing, learning how to read a map. I knew nothing when I started. I've done 2 world championships now, one out in Wyoming and one in Ecuador. I've done a bunch of US national championship races, a whole bunch of top 10 finishes. But it took a long time. So I've sort of been learning along the way. And one of the things that I really, really care about is getting new people into the sport because it's had such an impact on my life. And one of the best ways that anyone can do that is by hosting a race and doing clinics like this. And so I'm really happy that there's so many people on the call. And I hope that you do more adventure races than just VentureQuest. And I hope you do, race with more companies than just EX2. One of the things I want to talk about at the end is all the great adventure racing companies that are in the country, and specifically in the mid-Atlantic. Whether you know it or not, you're in like a hotbed of adventure racing in the United States. And that is truly a blessing. And there are really, really great options for you. And I'll talk about some of those at the end. Okay, so I want to go into a little bit about VentureQuest itself. So VentureQuest is a sprint adventure race. We're going to have only one course this year. We used to have 2 editions. One was sort of like more advanced and a little bit longer, like 8 hours. And then a more beginner-friendly, but still not super easy edition, which was 5 hours. Because of the complications with COVID this year, I got rid of the longer edition, and we only have a single race. And so that race, you have a 5-hour time limit. More often than not, I'm a fan of giving out maps, not necessarily at the last minute, but sort of the morning of the race. But because of the complications with COVID and one of our main concerns and one of the drivers in how we design courses, whether it's an adventure race or a running race or whatever, is to limit congregating. So this year, to limit the congregation, we're not only doing staggered starts, we're also doing a map pickup on Saturday afternoon. So if you're doing the in-person race, you can come anytime between 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock on Saturday the 19th to Pohick Bay, and we will basically check you in. The only thing that really you won't get on Saturday afternoon is your SI card, which is like a little punch that you put in the control boxes to let us know that you've gotten to each control. And at the end, I'll show you what one looks like and how it works. So first logistical thing is that if you're around and you can make it to get your maps and stuff on Saturday afternoon, totally fine. If you can't, it's no big deal whatsoever because the way I've set up check-in, basically you check in an hour before your race starts. So that should give you time to get in, check in, rack your bike, put it in, and then get your map and look at it. Hold on, so it's going to make sure everybody's muted. Okay. So that's the first thing. Map pickup will end at 5 o'clock. So you have from 2 o'clock until 5 o'clock, and that's basically when we're there kind of setting up. So there'll be a table there with maps. Another question, can a single person pick up a map? I don't need the whole team. So if you want to pick your stuff up for your teammates, that's fine. However, I'm not responsible if you lose stuff for your teammates. So, but you don't have to send the whole team if you don't want to. You just send a single person. That's totally fine. And again, the whole point of this is really just to avoid and make things easier for as many people as I can on race day, just because this is unique circumstances that we're dealing with this year. So those are good questions. All right. So again, I just want to make sure that you don't have to come to Saturday map pickup if you don't want to. Okay, you can get your map on Sunday morning. All right, so staggered starts. The next thing I want to talk about is how we're going to do staggered starts. And so I sent out an email to all the captains to select your check-in / start time. We're going to have 5 start times, 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, and 10. You check in 1 hour before your start time. Please try to be as on time as you can, because we have sort of like, if you check in at 7, for example, there's another group of people checking in at 7:30. Again, my whole goal behind that is to have small groups checking in so that we don't have this mass of people trying to check in all at the same time in the same place. And the way we've laid it out, it shouldn't be a problem. And my main goal is to make sure nobody feels like crazy worried being around a whole bunch of people. We just had a race, a trail running race this past weekend, and I did something very similar, and it worked out great. We got a good question. Can you pick up the map more than an hour before the race start? No, you can't. So I would like you to show up at your assigned check-in time. If you want your map more than an hour ahead of time, you need to come on Saturday afternoon. Can we check in a little early if there's no line? No, you can't. I have no idea what it's going to be like. I'm hoping everybody's on time, and the only way I can guarantee that it's not crowded is that if I enforce that everyone shows up when they're supposed to. So please honor that. And again, if you want your maps early, you can come on Saturday. Okay, so that's how the second chart. So anyway, so you have an hour before you race. You walk up, you get your maps and stuff. You go over, rack your bike, which is going to be just like 50 meters over from where you do check-in. There's really not much to do when you get to the park. We're going to park everybody pretty much in the main parking lot, which is right next to check-in, right where we stage the bikes, and right next to the race start. So everything is really compact. You're not going to have to travel any distances to drop bikes or anything like that. There's going to be a couple porta-johns right at the race start. The only thing that we really don't have a good source for is water. So you're pretty much on your own with water for the event. We'll have some bottled water and stuff for afterwards, but anything that you're going to use in the event, I would suggest you bring it with you. So that means filling up your bladder if you have something on your backpack, filling up your water bottles. And a good hint is that if you think you're going to need new water during the event, go to 7-Eleven before the race, get a gallon of water and put it in the TA with your stuff. That way, if you're ever coming through, and by the way, you'll come into that main TA twice during that 5-hour period, you have a gallon jug of water that you can use or you can share with your teammates. So that would be something that has worked well for me in the past in shorter events, and that might be a good idea for you. Okay, so that's how Stagger starts. So we're going to start, so you check in, and then we're going to start people every 30 minutes. The groupings look to be about 30 people to 40 people, depending on how the kind of final groupings work out. I'm going to try to get together at least a few of the same categories of teams. So for example, I'm not going to have all the soloists start together, but I'm going to have a group of soloists, a group of 2-person teams, and a group of 3-person teams start in every start window. Just so you have sort of a couple teams who you're kind of quote unquote racing against with you. We had a great question. Could you please email the PDFs of the maps on Saturday? So unfortunately I can't. At least one of the maps is copyrighted, if you will. So we get the maps from Quantico Orienteering Club, and those maps can't be reproduced without their permission. So I'm a little bit hesitant to email them out around. So I'm sorry, Cameron, I can't actually send the electronic versions of the maps ahead of time. Okay, so COVID. So the main thing we're doing for COVID is staggered starts. So limiting the amount of people that are in any one place at any given time. That's the most important thing and the best thing that I could do to keep everybody safe. In addition, I am going to ask that everybody bring a mask and wear it when you check in, and then afterwards. While you're racing, I'm going to ask that you carry it. That could be a buff that you put around your neck, around your wrist. It could be a mask that you put on. And that's really just, if you're around other people, you can put it on. If you were to get hurt, for example, and we need to come help you, we want you to have your own mask so that you can put it on while we're talking to you, or maybe having to carry whatever. So please have a mask with you, and I'll remind you of that several times. But when you're racing, you don't necessarily have to wear a mask unless you want to. That's up to you. The way I've designed the course and the way I've designed the staggered starts, I'm really trying to keep you away from a lot of people at any given time. So I don't really think you're going to see like crazy amounts of people once you're out on the course, especially after the first leg. Other precautions, so I have hand sanitizer at check-in afterwards. We're not doing a elaborate food spread like we normally do after our races. What I'm planning is a couple different types of soda, working on some burritos from our friends at Coyote Grill in Fairfax. I may have a lead on some non-alcoholic beer from Athletic Brewing. I'm not sure they're going to show up, but they might have something, maybe 1 or 2 for everybody afterwards. And some basic sort of packaged food stuff. So I will feed you afterwards, but it probably won't be this like expansive spread that we typically have after our races. And again, that's just to help keep everybody safe, as well as ourselves and our volunteers. Equipment. So we provide all the boats if you're doing the in-person race on September 20th. So that means soloists are going to be in kayaks with double-bladed kayak paddles. Teams of 2 or 3 are going to be in canoes with single-bladed canoe paddles, plus all the PFDs or life jackets. If you want to bring your own paddle, like your PFD or your paddle or something, you just love it, you can bring it, but you have to carry it to and from the paddle put-in. It's not long, and I would say it's probably not going to get you a whole lot. Based on how the course is laid out. But if you want to, like you have a paddle that you love more than anything, I'm not going to tell you not to bring it, but you have to carry it. Selfishly, that's because I don't really want to keep track of it. We're going to have a bunch of boats. And I don't want to have to keep track of, Mark's $600 carbon fiber 4-piece paddle when they're sitting next to a bunch of outfitter paddles. So if you want to use it again, you're on your own, carrying it to and from the paddle. Okay, we got a good question. Can we request to start with specific other people or teams? Yeah, so if you haven't requested your check-in time yet, your captain should have done that, but if he has not, you can pick whatever start time you want. So if you have another team that you want to race with, just pick the same start time. I'm going to go through and assign anybody who hasn't picked a start time yet. I'm happy to go 1 or 2 rounds over the next week to try to line up people who they want to race with. But at some point, I got to kind of cut it off and just say, hey, this is how we're going to do it. Good question about canoes. Are 3-person teams in 1 canoe? Yes, they are. So teams of 2 and or 3 are in a single canoe. I have a great picture of what that looks like if you stay for the clinic. If you've never done it before, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. And Jim, the canoes only do have 2 seats. That's correct. So that middle seat, whoever's luckily sitting in the middle, they can sit on a pack or on their knees, or some other way. Other things to bring. You have to provide your own mountain bike or your own bicycle. I'm not too much of a stickler on sort of like the type of bike that you have. There's some races out there that'll say like you have to ride a mountain bike and it has to have straight bars or whatever. You can ride whatever you want. I will tell you that you're going to have a mix of pavement, dirt and gravel road, and single track with rocks and roots. So if you want to ride your carbon fiber road bike on a bunch of single track, go for it. I'm not going to tell you not to, but just know that if I were doing the race, I would ride my mountain bike personally. But again, I just want you to come and do the race. Whatever bike you got, you got. Last year, people rode hybrids and they made it through. So you'll be okay with whatever you got. Other things to bring. During the race, I am not going to give you water or feed you. So you're responsible for carrying something to eat if you think you're going to be hungry in that 5-hour time period. And you're responsible for your own hydration. That means water, Gatorade, whatever you're going to drink. And you have to have some way to carry it, whether it's a backpack, water bottles, or some combination of the both. Our mandatory gear list, so depending on kind of what are the races you do, there are some races that have a pretty expansive gear list. I'm going to show you ours. It's really, really straightforward. And the only things you really kind of got to carry with you is a mountain bike, a bike helmet, obviously, and a way to carry some food and water for the race. There are some additional things for a team perspective. So I'm going to give you the maps and rules of travel, and I'll show you that during the clinic if you're interested. I would really love you to carry a bike repair kit. Trust me, if you get a flat tire, you're not going to want to have to beg other teams for a tube or whatever. So just make sure somebody in your team has a spare tube and some way to inflate it. You have to carry a watch. I don't want you out there all day. And so I'd love for you to know what time it is to make sure you're back on time. Somebody on your team has to have a watch. Somebody has to carry a cell phone. We don't require a bunch of medical stuff. We're not out in the crazy wilderness. If something really, really bad happens, you're going to call 911 and then you're going to call me. If something like not super bad happens, but you're like, I'm done, well, you can just use your cell phone to call me and tell me about it. That's your primary medical device right there, is your cell phone. We have good self coverage everywhere on the course. So I'm going to be a real stickler that at least one person on your team has to carry a cell phone with you. Obviously, it's going to be turned off. I would find some way to waterproof it. So whether that's 2 or 3 Ziploc bags put together, that's totally fine. You don't have to have some fancy dry bag, but some way to keep it dry. And also, I'd like someone to have a whistle on your team. This is really just to get people's attention. Although we're not like crazy out in the wilderness, there are places where you're kind of off the beaten path. And if you happen to be the last team out there, a whistle is a great way to get people's attention. It also provides a nice backup to your cell phone. Maybe you fell off your bike, your cell phone broke, and you have no way to yell. So you blow on your whistle and somebody will come get you. So whistle, again, is like sort of the one backup to the cell phone that we have. A lot of backpacks have whistles incorporated into the chest strap or on the straps. You can go to REI or someplace and get the cheapest whistle you can find if you want to. Let's see. A couple questions. Is the bike drop manned? Yes, bike drop is manned the entire time. This is true, obviously, just for the race in person. When you're doing the on your own race, and I'll talk about that, we're not going to have people out there all week watching bikes, but I'll talk about that when we get to the differences with the on your own course. Okay. Our maps are not going to be printed on waterproof paper this year, but they are printed on paper that's a little bit thicker than normal. So what that means is that you should either have a map case, which barely anybody has, unless you kind of get into adventure racing or boating or something. Bring a couple of gallon Ziploc bags with you, and that's more than adequate to keep your maps appropriately dry. Bring a couple, because you're going to have 5 maps in this race. So it's nice to kind of keep the maps separate, maybe. So bring a couple of Ziploc bags. They're useful for lots of things, but absolutely keep your maps dry. All right. Let's see. Other equipment. I think that covers it. Things you need to bring, I talked about that. All right, course description. So the course has a paddling section, a biking section, 2 trekking sections. The total course distance is just about 20 miles, depending, of course, on your route and how much of the course you decide to get. The way I've designed the course is I wanted it to be challenging and not super short for teams that are more advanced, but I also wanted teams to do as much as they can if they think it's hard. My primary mechanism for doing that is in the 2 trekking sections. What you'll find is that both trekking sections are not short, and they have quite a few points on each one of them. The more advanced teams, the more experienced teams should be able to clear the course. There will be many, many teams that clear the course, but not everybody's going to clear the course. If you are a beginner team, maybe not a great navigator, maybe not super fast, you can still have an awesome time doing this race course. But what you'll have to decide is you might get to a trekking section that, say, has 11 points on it. You might look at your watch and be like, hey, we don't have enough time to get all 11 points. Maybe you have time to get a couple. And part of the strategy is which points do you get, which points do you drop. All the points are going to be optional on those trekking points. I am going to have you get all the paddle points and all the mountain biking points. But the trekking points, basically everything is optional. So again, you can decide how many of those you want to get, largely based on the amount of time that you have on the course. But again, the course is clearable for sure, but not everyone's going to clear it. All right, let's see. So distance split. So the paddle is about 2 miles or so. The bike is give or take, 8 to 12. We'll call it 10, maybe, give or take again. And then the trek is probably maybe up to like eight-ish miles or so, split across two different treks. I will say that there is going to be a bike drop on the course, sandwich, where you're going to have to get off your bike, go do like a foot trek section, and then get back on your bikes and keep pedaling. Keep pedaling. So if you wear clip-in bike shoes, which not everybody does, but many of you might, when you get your rules of travel and your maps, you can decide whether you want to carry your trekking shoes with you on that biking section, so that you'll have your trekking shoes to put on to do that trek and not have to wear your bike shoes. What that also means is that if you are going to like have a backpack, for example, and you want to carry your shoes, you want a backpack that's going to be big enough to carry your shoes typically in your backpack. But that's up to you. But just be aware that there is a bike drop. If you want to carry your shoes to have them on that trek, I would have a way to carry them in your backpack. Couple of questions. Are all the trekking points equal value? Yes, every single point on the course is the same value, so 1 point, if you will. Is the bike ride a loop, or you have to go to a different place? You will depart and come back to the same place via your mountain bike. To answer that another way is, I will not be moving your bikes. You will be moving your bikes away from the start and then back to the start. I hope that answered your question. All right, let's see. Other hints. The biggest hint I could say, especially for the newer teams, is if you look at the maps and you're completely overwhelmed, because maybe you don't have a lot of experience looking at a topographic map, focus on the ones that you think are going to be easy to find. The way I design the course is I have some harder points and I have some easier points. Easier points might be like on a trail. So as long as you know that you're on the right trail, you should basically walk right to it. There are many points that aren't on a trail. So not only do you have to know where you are, but you have to know sort of like in the direction to go off trail to find those points. But again, I designed the course so that it would be challenging for people who are more experienced and maybe better navigators, but doable for the ones who are just beginning. But please know, if you are on the beginning side of the spectrum and you look at that map and you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to be able to find any of these things, just focus on the ones that you think you'll be able to find, and you might surprise yourself. Okay. Okay, good question. So question was about virtual race. Yes, and I am going to cover that next and the differences for the on your own version. Before I go on though, does anybody have any other questions that you can type in chat about the logistics for the in-person, like the one on September 20th? If not, I'll move on to some of the differences for the on your own edition, and then we'll talk about adventure racing just in general. Okay, very good question, Becky. Becky asked the questions, does everyone do the legs in the same order? And the answer is yes. So last year we had a race, the Greenhorn Adventure Race, where I actually started teams off on different legs. So like one group started with the paddle, another group started with the trek, and so on. But with the Staggered Starts, everyone is doing the disciplines in the same order. And I will tell you, I'll give you another hint. So the order is a trek to a paddle, and then a trek back, and then you mountain bike, and then you trek, and then you mountain bike, and then you trek. So that's the order. Again, so you trek to a paddle, trek back, mountain bike, trek, mountain bike again, trek. So that's the order of how the race is going to go. Good question. For the treks, can the points be hit in any order? And yes, most of the course can be done in any order except the very beginning and the mountain biking section. So I'm going to prescribe to you the order in which you do the mountain biking, and that's really just for safety and making sure people are on the right trail they're supposed to be. But everything else is like a row game. So free for all, you can get the points in any order in which you wish. Another good question. So we bring some sort of tub or something to store water, et cetera, in the transition area. You can, just don't bring like a huge tub, because you really don't need that much stuff for a 5-hour race. I'd bring some water with you, again, whether that's some water bottles or a gallon of water that you can use yourself or share amongst your teammates, maybe a couple gallons, so you have enough for your team of 3, for example. Changes of shoes and changes of clothes. I would recommend you wear the same clothes the whole race. It's 5 hours long. I don't think you're going to have to change pants or shirts or whatever. You can if you want, but I'd say plan on wearing the same stuff. Obviously, watch the weather. If we're going to get a lot of rain or something, you might want to bring something, particularly for after the race, or a raincoat or something. But if it's a nice day, shorts and a t-shirt. One other thing you might ask about, like, should you wear pants? When I was looking at the course, scouting the course, and pre-running the course, I was wearing shorts or tri-shorts the entire time, and I didn't have any problems with my legs getting all cut up. So the woods are fairly open in the entire course. Let's see, are the paddle and bike CPs required in sequential order? So the paddle is in any order, but the bike is in a prescribed order. Andrew asked a good question. For a beginner team following the easy trek path to earn points, what would be the total mileage? So here's the part of the fun. There is no really easy path. It's the path that you choose. So you decide which ones you think are easy. And then you do as much as you want. Again, that's part of the challenge for people who are new to the sport, because that's a weird thing when somebody doesn't say, hey, do this in this order, following this path. So really it's up to you, and it'll be how you feel once you're out there racing. But I would encourage you to, again, give it a shot, and what's the worst that happens, right? You get lost. You got a big body of water on one side, a major road on the other, and we'll come and get you. But don't worry about getting lost. Another good question. Are ticks bad in the area? Not really, but it is still warm out, obviously. I'm pretty adamant about putting bug spray on anytime I go out in the woods. And I haven't pulled a tick off me once from going there, but it does not mean that they're not there. But I would absolutely wear bug spray for sure. All right, Matt, you have a good question. Will we be able to drop our bikes the morning when we check in? Will we be shown directly where it is? Yes. So this is a good thing. I'll do one better. Let's see. Can everybody see that? I tried to put it in the middle. So this is a satellite imagery of Pohick Bay Regional Park. So you kind of come into the park off Gunston Road. You kind of come in, and there's a big field. This is actually a Frisbee golf course. So we really tick off the Frisbee golf players because we take over two of their holes for this race. This is where we're going to set up the bike TA. You'll see it when you drive by. It's really obvious. We're going to have blue EX2 fencing there, bike racks, everything will be in this big field. This parking lot right next to it is where you're going to park. And then check-in is going to be in some pavilions right in this corner, sort of like the upper right corner of the parking lot. And this is not a huge area. Again, this is like 50 meters from where you check in to where you drop your bikes. So it may take 15 minutes, 10 minutes to check in, another 10 minutes to drop your bikes off. I will say a good suggestion would be to don't mess with your bike like tomorrow. Don't mess with your bike the night before the race, and don't mess with your bike the day of the race. So make sure everything's in working order now, so that when you show up on race morning, you got your pack, maybe with whatever you're going to carry, your water's filled, you're ready to go. You just have to walk over and drop your bike. That would be my advice to you. And yes, we'll have people directing where to park, where check-in is, where to drop your bikes, and so on. But again, it's not a huge area. Great question about watches and GPS. So this is something that has evolved over the past 15 years. When I started racing, GPSs were like this big, right? And the batteries died in like an hour. Well, now you can wear a watch like this, and it tracks for 24 hours plus. So I will say, adventure racing is, it's easy to cheat at an adventure race. you could pull out your smartphone and pull up a map and you'll know exactly where you are. It's very hard to police the sport in a 5-hour race and even a longer race. It's done on the honor system. So what I would ask is that if you have a GPS watch and you want to track, like have it track to see how far you're going or whatever, just start it and just throw it in your backpack and forget you have it. I have no problem with you guys carrying a GPS watch in particular that doesn't like have a screen on it. Starting it, locking the screen, throwing it in your backpack, and then afterwards you can be like, hey, we did 18 miles. And you can go back and look at your track afterwards because that's kind of cool. What I don't want you to do, what I would consider cheating, is wearing your watch on the wrist and being able to track your distance via that watch during the race. So for example, instead of using pace counts or the map, you know, okay, it's 100 meters through the woods and you're staring at your watch until you get to 100 meters. I would consider that to be cheating, and that would be grounds for disqualification. But again, if you want to start your watch in your GPS, throw it in your backpack, go for it. Again, part of the reason for that, and even on your wrist, it's so hard to tell what's a GPS watch, what's not a GPS watch. They all look the same now, and they didn't 10 years ago, but they do now. So it's really just based on the honor system. I hope that answers your question, but that's my advice for that. Great question. Bike speedometers. So as long as your bike speedometer is not GPS based and based on the revolutions of your wheels, which most bike odometers are, totally fine. And I would say most adventure racers have a bike computer that's not GPS, again, based on the revolutions of your wheel on their bike. So you can totally leave your bike on there as long as it's not like this fancy $600 Garmin on your bike, okay? If it's the sort of the manual kind, even wireless, but again, based on the revolutions of your wheel, that's totally fine. Let's see, will you have a pace count station at check-in, or is it on your own? That's a great question. I won't have a pace count station, but what I would recommend you do, if you don't know, for example, how many paces is 100 meters, which is really a really great thing to know as somebody who's navigating or just an adventure racer. If you have a GPS watch, switch your watch to kilometers, go out on your street, start your watch and count your paces till you get to 100 meters. For me, it varies, from like 45 to 60, depending on where I am in the train that I'm on and whether it's daylight or nighttime or whatever, but I know how many paces I am. Some advice is make sure you figure out whether you're counting every step, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or every other step. I happen to count every other step, like 1, 2, 3, 4, just because it's easier for me. So I won't have a pace count station, but if you have a GPS watch, go practice. It's kind of fun. All right. Great question, Paul Morris. Oh, you sent that privately, sorry. It's John. A lot of vegetation in the water impact the race at all? So if you did the race last year, I took you on a very interesting voyage, and I think one of the most beautiful paddles in the area. The paddle is different this year. There is some vegetation, but it's not quite as adventurous as last year. So there is some vegetation to deal with. You might have to get out of your boats. But I wanted to do it so that it's not super annoying. But will you get some seaweed in your boat or whatever the equivalent is? Probably, but it's nothing to worry about. All right, let's see. I have a question. So is GPS usage a non-standard requirement for the virtual races in order to be part of the results timing? Okay, Matt has a good question. And I'll use this to jump into the differences with the on your own course. So the way I'm going to do, so in a normal race, we have an e-punching system. So basically it's a little box like this that works off of RFID, and you get like a little kind of thing that looks like a little finger, and you the box has a hole in it. You stick your little dipper in and it goes beep, beep. And that's how we track that you've made to each control. So we have electronic timing for the in-person race. For the on your own course, we are not going to do that. So I'm not going to have the control boxes out on the course. I am not going to mail you an SI card, if you know what that is. So the way I'm going to keep track of score, so to speak, on the on your own course is a couple different ways. One is on every control, I'm going to have a clue. And basically that clue is going to be like the word dog or the letter A or the number 6. And I'm going to mail you in your packet basically a paper passport. And if you think about it, as you go around the course, you fill out your passport with those clues. So for example, checkpoint 1 might have a little tag on it that says A. So you would write A on your passport. After the race, I'm going to send you a link to a Google form where you just put in your team name, your answers to those questions, when you started the race and when you finished the race. That's something that everybody can do. You don't have to have a fancy GPS watch, and I'll know that you've been to each one of the controls. If you have a fancy GPS watch and you want to keep track of your track, I will have an option for you to send that to me afterwards. So you can send me a link to your Strava, your Garmin Connect, whatever it happens to be, and I'll also use that to verify that you went on the course. All right. Okay. Good question. So let's see. Are the CPs going to be marked with those lantern things that they use in orienteering? Yes. So standard 12 by 12 orienteering flags, they're orange and white. Those will be out on the course, and that is what you're looking for. Can we use your own e-punch? If you are doing the in-person race on the 20th, if you bring your own e-punch, then yes, you should be able to use your own e-punch. The woman who's timing our event is the lead timer for Quantico Orienteering Club, and I believe she will have the capability for you to use your own e-punch if you want to use it. If you don't want to use it, that's totally fine. We're going to have them for you. Mark's question, will the real version, meaning on the 20th, have actual punches? So Mark, I believe what you're talking about is sort of like the red little punchy thingamajiggies, right? No, we're actually going to use electronic punching. So we won't have the more old school sort of pin punch to verify where you're at. Okay, Matt has a good question. Is trekking dead reckoning, or will it use grid, different map terminology? So the trekking is going to be on a varying types of topographic map. And so on that topographic map, you're going to have contour lines, you're going to have trails, you're going to have what's a clearing, what's water, stuff like that. And you're going to use those things on your map to figure out where you are. Can you use dead reckoning? Sure. Meaning, can you look at where you are, look at where you're going on the map, take a bearing, and go right there? Absolutely. Do you have to? Not necessarily. A lot of that depends on the skill of the navigator. There's going to be a lot of people who do this race who, first of all, have no idea what I'm talking about right now. That's totally fine. But there's going to, and people are going to be like, okay, I want to get on this trail. I'm going to follow this trail, and then that's going to lead me to the checkpoint. There's going to be other people who, can cut through the woods and know exactly where they're going using what's on the map and what they see in real life. And they may never use a compass at all. So all that is in the realm of possibility. Cool. All right. Okay. Any other questions on okay, so on your own, a couple other differences. So I'm going to mail you your map rules of travel in time so that you'll get them at the latest on that weekend of the race, but you can't do the on your own course until the 21st, which is that Monday. We are not providing boats for the on your own version, but if you want to bring your own boat, and I will provide instructions on what to do with it if you want to bring it, you can use your own boat. Or POHIC rents boats on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you can rent a boat from POHIC Bay, and I will provide instructions in the rules on what to do in the case of you rent a boat, how to handle that. And you can just rent a boat for an hour or whatever and go paddle and then just continue on the course. Because of that, the paddle is optional, right? If you don't want to rent a boat, if you come on a Tuesday and you can't rent a boat, well, just go out and do the rest of the course. There's plenty of stuff to keep you occupied and keep you fun for a few hours and practice. If you don't want to do the paddle, right? So please know that don't show up on a Tuesday expecting there to be this beautiful canoe waiting for you at the paddle put in, right? I'm going to tell you in your rules how to rent a boat if you want to, but only on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Again, if you have your own boat and you want to bring it, totally fine. And I'll talk about that in the rules as well. Okay, good question, Kyle. Kyle asks, can on your own racers have support crew at the transition area to watch your stuff? 100%. Yes, you can have somebody. As an alternative, right? You can TA out of your car. So you can put your bike, for example, in your car. You can lock it to your bike rack. On the place where there's the remote bike drop, you can carry a small lock with you, or you can just hide it in the woods. I will tell you, I've hidden my bike at this place many, many times and never even once worried about it, particularly during the week. And even on the weekend, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you go on like a Wednesday, you might not see anybody else in the whole park except yourself. So again, like if you're worried, lock your bike for sure, and don't, be smart about where you're doing it, especially like in the parking lot. I would lock it to your car or put it in your car or truck and make sure it's locked up. But just TA out of your car. But you can certainly have somebody with you if you want. Sure. Hope that answered your question, Kyle. Let me think for a sec for the on your own. There are going to be a couple differences with the on your own version versus the in-person version, just because, again, I use the TAing out of your car, or like starting in the parking lot with your car. You don't have to, like in the real version, we're going to be in this field. There's going to be bike racks, and that's where you're going to start. And on the map, it's going to show start in the field. For the on your own version, you're going to have the same exact maps that the people doing the in-person race have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to annotate your rules of travel that says, if you're doing the on your own version, instead of starting in the field, you're going to start 50 meters to the east in the parking lot. And it's going to be super obvious what I'm talking about because it's the only parking lot around. Okay. So don't be stressed like it's going to be confusing. It's really not. And that's just because you might be the only person there doing that on your own course at that particular time. Okay, good question. Matt asks about, is the park only officially open from sunrise to sunset? The official answer is yes. So there is a campground there. So technically the gate is open 24 hours, so they don't lock anybody in. I would ask that you don't do it at like 2 o'clock in the morning, because although I have a great relationship with the park, they might be like, Andy, why are you having people run around the park at all hours of the night, waking up campers? So if you want to come like really early in the morning, you can get into the park. You could start early. I would just ask that it's not designed to be done at night, but you can, come really early if you want to get it done like before work or something. Totally fine. And I hope that answers your question. I think you get what I'm putting down. Okay, good question. Teresa asks, if we don't get all the points, we'll be disqualified. No. And so the way we're going to score the event is basically by the number of controls you get or the number of checkpoints you find, and then by time. Now, I will say, it may feel a little weird to not get all the points. But what you'll find about this race and every other adventure race out there is that sometimes the teams that win don't get all the points. And some teams that do very, very well, particularly in the age group results, don't get all the controls. And so it's really based on how many you think you can get. And I will say that I'm quite sure that not every single team is going to clear the course. I will guarantee that. So if you don't get them all, I will tell you, you're not going to be the only team. So race your race, do the best you can, and just see where everything falls out. Jim, you had an important part. That is correct. POHEC does not rent boats Monday through Thursday. So if you want to rent a boat, it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I think they start renting boats at 10 o'clock in the morning, but you have to, again, in the instructions, it'll tell you the hours and where to get them. But I think it's like 10 o'clock to say 4 or 5-ish on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I just rented a boat down there recently and it was super easy. Let's see. A hard start or stop times for the virtual race. What I would ask is that you track your time on your own. So use your watch and say, I'm going to start this time and then I'm going to finish on that time, and that's how you report it. Time penalties for being late. Yes. If you're a minute late, you lose a checkpoint. If you're 5 minutes late, you lose 2-point checkpoints, and so on and so on. So try not to be late. And Becky had the same question. Are points taken away for increments over the 5-hour time limit? Yes. Don't be late. It gets really demoralizing if you spend 5 hours busting your butt and you finish 10 minutes late and I take away 3 controls from you. So just don't be late. Jared has a good question about on your own. Can you use a stand-up paddleboard? Yes. You can use any watercraft as long as it doesn't have a motor. So I don't care what it is. As long as you think it's going to float, you can use it. And a stand-up paddleboard for the paddle would be super fun and totally doable. So bring your sup and go for it. All right. So I think that's all I want to cover on the on your own. And again, I'm going to mail you your packet, and in your packet, it's going to have your maps, your rules of travel, and then like a whole bunch of instructions, including stuff like, hey, do you need to lock your bike? How do you rent a boat? Stuff like that. I want to make it as easy for you as possible. And if you have any questions, like you can call me. My phone number is on everything pretty much I send out. That's my cell phone. You're welcome to call me or text me, send me an email, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. All right. There was a question about volunteers. Yes, if you want to come out and volunteer, we may need some more. On the EX2 website, you can go to About EX2 and volunteer sign up, and you can sign up to volunteer. Volunteering is a great way to learn about adventure racing. So, all right. So I think that's the end of the information about the VentureQuest course itself. Before I sort of break, does anybody have any other questions? Because now I'm going to move on to sort of the clinic part of the presentation. All right, cool. Virtual maps are in the mail. Yes, I'm going to email you. I'm going to mail you the physical maps. Who doesn't like to get mail, right? It's awesome. Cool. All right. I am not mailing burritos, unfortunately, but you can get them at Coyote Grill, and please do. Okay. Good question from Chris about spectators. So here's the thing with spectators. I'm gonna say in my previous email that spectators should not really come. And here's the reason why. We're under pretty strict limitations on gathering size. And even with the staggered starts, if a bunch of people show up at the end or to watch, if everybody brings, 2 kids, a dog, and then it quickly goes from a couple hundred people to many hundreds of people, and then we would get in trouble. So the easy answer is just, I'm going to say no, and I hope people understand. I'm sure somebody will bring someone. But for this race in this particular time of what's going on, I really want it to be just the racers, the volunteers, and my team at the park. 'Cause I can't prevent other people from coming to the park. Obviously, it's public, it's open, but I hope you kind of understand. So, but that's a great question, Chris. All right. Okay. Cool. So now I'm going to move on to a little bit more about adventure racing formats. I'm going to show you some rules of travel and maps. I'm going to teach you how to orient your compass over a computer, which is going to be a fascinating experiment. I'll show you a couple maps to give you sort of some things to look at. And then at the end, I'll share with you some additional resources to go find other races that are around, and so on. So I'm going to have a sip of this, and then we'll start with sort of a very, very brief history of adventure racing and then formats. So I started adventure racing in 2006. I would say that was like sort of like sort of like the tail end, or maybe like a little bit in the heyday of the first Eco Challenge bubble. So I don't know if anybody has watched the latest Eco Challenge that was just filmed this past September. It's on Amazon Prime. I would suggest that you watch it in preparation for this race, because it will get you seriously prepared and seriously stoked to be out there adventure racing. In the late 80s, a guy named Gerard Foucault, a Frenchman, had this crazy idea to have people doing this multi-sport across the French countryside for days and days and days. And that was a race called the Raid Gaulois. And that was sort of like, I believe, like sort of like the first commonly sort of accepted like adventure race. And again, that was in the late 80s. Eco Challenge came in the early 90s, and by a guy who actually did one of those raid races, and his name was Mark Burnett. So Mark Burnett might sound familiar to you because that's the guy who came up with Survivor. And so Mark Burnett did one of those early raids and thought, wouldn't it be really cool to put some of these crazy people doing these crazy things on TV? And so Eco Challenge really spawned a huge amounts of interest in the late 90s, early 2000s in the sport of adventure racing. Eco Challenge was on, I think, in 2002. That was, I think, the last Eco. And again, they just filmed one in Fiji in the fall of 2019. And Mark Burnett was there, but he sort of handed off the reins to Bear Grylls. And so if you've watched it on Amazon, you see Bear's face there. He's sort of like the new face of Eco Challenge. And so I believe they have a 3-year contract. The next one is going to be in Patagonia, probably in the fall of 2021. So it's going to be on TV for the next couple of years. And again, Eco was really the thing that really spurred on a lot of interest again in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was other big races, like Primal Quest was a big race in the United States that was held a bunch of different times. The Adventure Racing World Series is something that's in several different countries. There's events around the world that started in the early 2000s, and it goes through now. There's an Adventure Racing World Championships that moves around from country to country every year. The 2021 World Championship is going to be in Spain, which is pretty awesome. The last, really the only time the Adventure Racing World Championships was held in the States was out in Wyoming, and that was put on by a buddy of mine, Mark Harris, who runs Adventure Enablers, and they're based out of Front Royal. Mark puts on great races. He's got one coming up in the spring they should check out. And I also did the one down in Ecuador, outside of Quito. So really the sport has a long history, but not really that long when you think about it, compared to other sports. One of the main differences with adventure racing, and you probably picked up on it with how I'm describing it, is that it's different from like a triathlon where you have, swim, bike, run, a very prescribed course, prescribed set of disciplines, and the course is the same. So you could go out and do like Savage Man, for example, up at Deep Creek every single year, and the course is largely the same. You could have done all 13 editions of VentureQuest, for example, and the course is never the same. So one of the main differences is that, unlike a triathlon where you do the same course over and over and over again, even the same event from the same event promoter changes from year to year, which to me is one of the things that makes it such an exciting sport, is because it's always new, and there's always an element of uncertainty, not only an uncertainty about how you're going to do as an athlete and as a team, but an uncertainty of what you're going to get in terms of a course, where you're going to go and what you're going to see. And so again, to me, that's one of the things that makes it so exciting. The lengths of adventure racing vary wildly. So VentureQuest is known as a sprint adventure race. So sprint adventure races really range from like 2 to, some could argue, up to like 8 hours or so. There's like a middle length, like 12 hours. Some people would consider even that like a sprint adventure race, but 12 hours, another common distance or common length of an adventure race. Then you typically jump up to like a 24-hour. The cool thing about 24-hour races is that you're racing through the night. One of the things that I think got me hooked so early with adventure race, even though I had no clue what I was doing, is I raced through the night. I went swimming in a pond at like 2:00 in the morning, my first ever adventure race, and this is the craziest thing I ever did, and I thought it was the coolest thing. So if you get to a point you've never done a race and like done stuff at night, I would say certainly work up to it or just give it a try, because it really is a cool experience. Once you get over 24 hours, then you get into sort of more quote unquote expedition style racing. The ARWS, or the Adventure Racing World Series, length races are generally kind of like 3 to 5 day-ish range. Eco Challenge was 10 days long. And so, and what's important to know about these races is they're not like 10 days and then you have a nice like 8 hours sleep where everybody's off the clock every night and you just, like a stage race, it's on the clock. So it's 10 days straight or 3 days straight. So when you sleep, but you're on the clock, and it's somebody else might not be sleeping. So again, the longer the event is, things like sleep strategy become more important. Anyway, so 2 hours to 10 days, all over the place, all around the world. But generally they all have mountain biking, some sort of trekking, on your foot, paddle, typically canoes and kayaks, but whitewater rafting, stand-up paddleboarding, sailing, all sorts of different stuff. And if you watched Eco Challenge, you saw all that stuff. Riding a billy, if you happen to watch Eco Challenge. So there's all sorts of different paddle sports, but it's all human powered. Some adventure races, typically the longer ones, will have some sort of climbing or ropes work, whether it's ascending a rope, descending a rope, like rappelling, or some sort of like Tyrolean traverses, which is like kind of like working your way horizontally or across a rock structure. You don't see that until you get into longer races. And I will say climbing elements of races have become pretty uncommon these days. Like even in some of the 24-hour plus races, you won't see climbing stuff all that often, but you will the longer the events go. Another thing that's different about adventure racing is it's not a relay. So you're with a team. So typically the most common team requirements is teams of 4, actually. More often than not, it's a requirement that it's a co-ed team of 4. Like if you did a World Series race, you were required to have a co-ed team of 4 people. So that in itself poses a challenge, right? To find 4 people or 3 other people that you can hang out with for 5 days and not want to kill them after a day, and you're with them all the time. So team dynamics is a huge element of adventure racing. And again, the longer the race is, the more important those team dynamics come to be. So you're with each other. You have to be within 100 feet, 100 meters, whatever the race director dictates, but you got to be close to your teammates at all given times. Again, one of the things that makes adventure racing unique, and what that means is that you're as fast or as slow as your weakest link or your slowest teammate at that particular time. In a 5-hour race like VentureQuest, you might have teams that feel awesome the entire time and they go the same speed. But I can guarantee you, in a 24-hour race or a 5-day race or a 10-day race, you're going to have teammates that are up and are down multiple times. Even in a 24-hour race, you're going to have team members that feel awesome and team members that don't feel awesome. And so one of the things that the best teams do and the best teams in the world do is they do whatever they can to move the team forward. So whether that's carrying a backpack of somebody who's not doing great, or towing people. There's all sorts of ways you can tow people on foot and on bike and even on boat to make the team go faster. Really, a key element for adventure racing. Again, it doesn't matter how long it is, but it's really, it's the team has to think what's best for the team and really understand and take care of each other. And again, the longer the event is, the more important it is that you not only know how to take care of yourself, but you also can know how to take care of your teammates. And ego goes out the door. You look at the best teams in the world, like Team New Zealand and other folks. There's no ego on those teams ever. They take care of themselves. Chris, your son asked Charlie if I ever done Eco Challenge, and I never have. So I did a Primal Quest, which was a 10-day race back in 2008 out in Montana, which was my longest race ever, but I've never done the Eco Challenge. And last year wasn't a good year for me to be able to go away for a couple of weeks. So I had an opportunity to sort of apply, but I decided not to. And I decided not to apply this year as well. There's a lot of uncertainty in 2021, if you can imagine. So it's like a month-long commitment, and they said it was either going to be in February or November. And I was like, whoa, too much uncertainty for me. But maybe in 2022, I'll try to get on a team, because it'd be pretty awesome. Okay. Maps, rules of travel, and passports. So I'm going to show you some stuff now. And so this will hopefully make it a little bit more real to you. And so hopefully you guys can see this. I don't know what the chat is covering up. But I'm going to kind of, so these are some pictures of and I have some bigger versions of this I'll show you, but this is the Greenhorn course last year at Lake Fairfax. And so a couple of things I just want to point out to you is there's more than one map. And again, you're going to get 5 maps for VentureQuest. The maps don't always look the same. So that's another thing to note. And this is the rules of travel. And I'm going to pull this up here in a second. This is actually last year's VentureQuest map. And just to give you a little more sort of ideas, I guess, if you look at it. So it's kind of really hard to see, but this is the start and finish. Down here, there's a parking lot here. This is Pohick Bay. This is where you're going to be potentially paddling. So water is blue on a map. That's like lesson number 1. Another thing that could be handy that you can look or get at by looking at this map is it might be hard to see in your screen, but whoever's team this was, they highlighted their route, so where they were going to go. And so one technique that navigators use is when they get their maps, they think about their route before they go do it. And oftentimes they use markers or highlighters to highlight where they are going to go. The advantage of that is that you can look at it quickly and be like, okay, I need to go from checkpoint 3 to checkpoint 4. How am I going to get there? Well, if they've highlighted their particular route, they don't have to think about it. So that's one technique that, again, you can see on this map. This is another sort of map. So again, this is last year's at Pohick. I'm going to show you some details of that. But, okay. One other thing before I show you some other maps. So when you get your maps, whether it's on Saturday, whether it's on Sunday, what I would suggest you do first is, as a team, read the entire rules of travel, like from start to finish. What that's going to do is it's going to give you an overview of the entire race. It's very tempting to go directly to the map and be like, okay, what are we doing first? What are we doing second? What are we doing third? And when you do it that way, you kind of lose the big picture. So what, again, I would recommend is you, as a team, read the entire rules of travel so that everybody has a good understanding. Okay, we're paddling first, and then we're mountain biking, and then we're trekking. And then whether it's the navigator or everybody on the team goes to like the next level of detail and then looks at the map and be like, okay, where's checkpoint 1? Where's checkpoint 2? Where's checkpoint 3? Whatever. So again, start big picture and then work down a little bit. And this is what this team is doing here. So they're looking at the map, they're writing on it, taking some notes, and planning out their route. All right, I'm going to flip through. So this is the orange and white orienteering flag. You can see. So this is what you're looking for. So these are going to be hung in the woods. They're pretty conspicuous. They'll stick out. They're not going to be hidden anywhere. You just have to make sure you're in the right spot. And this little box here that you can see in this picture, so that's that RFID control box. And you can see this yellow thing in her finger, that's that little SI card. And so if you're doing the in-person race, every team is gonna get one of those. And when you go to the control, there's a little hole in that box. You just stick your little SI card in the box, it'll beep, literally it'll go beep, beep. And that's how you know that we know you went to that control. And at the end, we get all that data off that little yellow stick, and we know what controls you went to, what order they went to, and when you went there. So it's actually pretty cool. I will say you don't have to hold it in there for like 20 seconds. Every time it beeps, it actually records a piece of data. So really you just need to have it beep once and take it out and go. But that's what they look like. Okay, let me show you some more map stuff. So, well, let's start with the rules of travel. So this is the rules of travel for the Greenhorn Adventure Race. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Hold on 1 second. Let's see. All right. Hopefully you guys can see that. So what I want you to know about it is that it's going to tell you some basic rules on top, like this is you have to finish on time. You can, this isn't going to apply to VentureQuest. This is when I had the group start in different disciplines. But then it's going to tell you, like leg 1, start on a paddle, for example. Leg 2, trek. Leg 3, bike. And this is very similar to what it's going to look like for VentureQuest. So it's going to give you a description of what you're doing. So in this case, it says trek to P1, get boat, paddles, and PFD. Paddle to CPs P2, P5 in order. So it's going to either tell you to do things in order or going to say do them out of order. That could vary depending on the segment of the race. And then underneath that segment, it's going to give you the CP, right? So P1 in this case. And then next to that, it's going to give you a clue. So P1, and the clue is small beach. And if you were to pull up the map of this race, which is here, what you do is you find P1, and this yellow section here means it's open, so there's no trees. So this must be a beach. The clue is small beach. So you know when you're running on this road to this little body of water, it's going to be on the shoreline, right? So again, you use your rules of travel for clues, and then you match that up with what it looks like on your map. All right. Let's see. I'll show you another example. So this is a trek. Let's see. So we'll just pick one. T3, gas line Re-Entrant. So if you find T3, which is right here, a couple of things that I'll give you a little hint about. Make this a little bit bigger. Hopefully that's really big for you guys to see. So a couple of things I want to point out in little maps, hints about a map. So anytime there's just like yellow area here, that's open area. There is going to be a legend on the map that tells you what the different symbols are, but the really important ones are this yellow color, which means it's open. Blue is water. And then it's really important to know like what's a trail and what's a road. So basically, if it's dotted lines, typically that's a trail. The thicker the dotted line, the more pronounced the trail. The lighter the dotted line, the less pronounced the trail. And water can be like a body of water, like you see here, or what you're going to see in Pohig Bay at VentureQuest, or it could be like little streams, right? So one term of art that's used a lot in orienteering and adventure racing is this term Re-Entrant. And so Re-Entrant basically is, you can almost think of it like a big ditch, sort of. So Re-Entrants, not always, but sometimes have sort of an indication of water in them. So this clue is Re-Entrant and power line. So this yellow line here indicates an open space. So if you've ever seen like a power line or a gas line, there's typically no trees in them, right? And so if you can picture this as like an open space that runs through the woods, and then it crosses this Re-Entrant. And a Re-Entrant is sort of like this little up and down cutout where you might have water in it, and if you're standing in the re-entrant, it would be high on both sides, kind of slope down. So you will see several different re-entrants on the course itself. And if you don't know what one is, the best way to do it is when you find your first one in VentureQuest, look around and be like, oh, this is what a re-entrant is. And it only takes you to see it once to realize kind of what the land looks like around you. But again, it may or may not have water in it, and you're kind of like, almost like standing in a big ditch is like the best way I can describe it, right? All right. Controls are going to be these pinkish, reddish circles, right? Typically, the point is going to be in the center of that circle. So the circle is big so you can see it. Just know that the control is going to be right in the middle of that circle. We had a question, is the re-entrant like a draw? The answer is yes. Yeah, it's like a draw. Let me make sure I got other questions here. Are the CPs self-correcting? So self-correcting means, are the CP numbers going to be on the controls themselves? And the answer is yes. I will have some visual indication that when you get to CP 5 is written on there somewhere. It might be on a streamer or something, but there'll be some way you can say, hey, where the heck are we? And it'll be written on the control. Should we expect to swim? The answer is no, you should not expect to swim in this race. I did think about it, but not this race. Okay, couple other things on the map. So let's see. The legend will tell you what the different symbols mean, but you may see a line that looks like this. This typically means like a road, or like a more major road. You may see a solid black line that also might mean a road, but maybe like a smaller road. Dotted lines are going to be trails. Again, the thicker the dotted line, the more pronounced the trail. These brown squiggly lines here are contour lines. So they tell you whether you're basically going up or down and tell you how steep the terrain is. I will give you a very, very quick lesson on topo lines as they relate to maps. And I'm going to use this point right here as an illustration. If you have a closed circle, right, typically that means a high point. Sometimes people get confused between a hilltop and a depression. The symbols are very similar, but for this race, you don't have to worry about what the depression symbol is. Really just look for that closed circle, and that means like the highest point in that particular area. If you notice that on 3 sides, you have blue squiggly lines, which indicate water. You also have these lines that are kind of angled down, or angled like pointing to the water. You have these lines here that seem to be pointing uphill. This is a re-entrant, meaning your ditch is kind of coming up towards the top of this high point. This is a ridge line, meaning you're heading down the ridge to that creek. When you first start looking at a map, it is very confusing to figure out which ones are re-entrants, meaning which ones are going up, and which are ridge lines, or which ones are going down. I remember when I first started looking at maps, I would get them confused all the time. I will say that it takes practice, but the important thing, one thing to know is look for the water. Oftentimes that can give you an indication of, okay, well, is it going up or is it going down if we walk this way? If you're going towards water and the land is going down, typically that's a good indication that you're going maybe like down a ridge towards water. That's all I'm going to say about that. It takes practice, but just to give an indication of kind of what these things look like on the map, and they could be useful tools. All right, let's see. What else can I show you about a map? I think that's about it. These little black things here, those are houses. So man-made objects might be on a map. Usually they're black X's or black squares. If there's buildings, like this is what a building might look like. So again, they're pretty obvious things that you'll see on the map. All right, let's see. All right. let's move on because we're want to finish up here in the next couple minutes. Paddling. So paddling, you're in canoes and kayaks. So my buddy Josh up there, he's paddling in a kayak. So anybody who's solo will be in a kayak. Anybody who is in a team of 2 or 3 will be in a canoe. This is what 3 people looks like in a canoe. I don't think the boats, now I'm looking, I don't think they're going to have 3 seats. So I think this gentleman is sitting on either a backpack or something he might have brought, but plan on 2 seats, front and back, and a place for the 3rd person to sit in the middle. If you've never had even 2 people in a canoe before, the best way to make a canoe feel stable is to get low in the boat. The higher you are in a canoe, the less stable the boat is going to be. So if you get in it and you're like, oh, really sort of squirrely, if everybody sits on their butt in the canoe, it's going to be super stable. That's like the best advice I can give you for new canoers. All right, let's see. Mountain biking. So there is a mix of pavement, dirt roads, and single track trails. So this is a picture of the place you're going to mountain bike. It's dirt. There are some rocks and some roots for sure. This is, I believe, a 9-year-old doing it last year. So my advice to you is that even if you're a really crappy mountain biker, I'm going to tell you, hey, a 9-year-old did it last year, you can do it. If there's places where you have to get off your bike and walk, get off your bike and walk. There's absolutely no shame in it. The goal is just to keep moving forward and don't hurt yourself. So ride within yourself and just do the best you can. The mountain biking on single track is less than 5 miles if you do the whole section of mountain biking on the single track. The rest is pavement or a dirt road. Some of you might have heard or seen this concept of a map board before. If you get into adventure racing and you want to navigate, it's much easier to read a map that's on some sort of board on your bicycle than it is to have it in like a map case around your neck and have to keep looking at it. So this is an example of what a map board looked like. A few people at this race might have them, but they're really common when you get into like longer races and you have people who are more experienced. Oftentimes the navigator, maybe even plus someone else, is going to have a map board on. It's really just to be able to look at the map while you're riding your bicycle. Sounds very safe, doesn't it? But yeah, but it's definitely works. All right, let's see. I think that's really it for mountain biking, paddling. All right, next I want to try to show you something, and I don't know if it's going to work. I'm going to do my best to show you how to orient a map. So bear with me for a second. All right, I don't know how to pin myself, but if you can, let's see if hopefully that made me bigger. So this is a map of actually like my neighborhood. And what I want to show you is, you might not be able to see exactly what I'm doing, but I'm going to try to talk you through it. So on every map, there's a critical piece of information in some shape, form, or another. And that is up here. Hopefully everybody can see this. This is basically like a compass rove or something pointing you north, right? It's going to look differently depending on like the map, but to orient a map, this is really the thing that you're looking for. The other thing that you need is a compass. So this is a compass. There's a zillion different kinds of compasses. There's all sorts of fanciness that you can get with them, but I'm going to show you how to orient a map with the most basic of compasses. The only thing you have to know is which way or what's pointing north on your compass. And on the compass needle, typically there's going to be 2 colors. More often than not, it's red and black. Sometimes there's like orange and different variations, but generally it's red and black. The red side of your compass is pointing to the north, okay? Always. So to orient your map, so you know right now, you know that red arrow is pointing to the north. You also know on your map that this little line is pointing to the north. So all you do to orient your map is don't turn the bezel, don't do anything else to this compass. Hold it and hold out your map and put the compass on top of your map. Look at your map and find that red needle. Turn your body, don't turn the map, so turn your body until that red needle points in the same direction as the north line on your map. So I'm going to say it one more time. So take your map, you'll see that little north thing going up. Take your compass, literally just drop it on top. And again, don't tinker with the bezel and don't try to finagle with it. It doesn't matter with what we're doing. Look at the direction at which your red little needle is pointing and move your body. In this case, I'm turning my body until that red arrow is going in the same direction as the north arrow on my map. When you do that, now your map is oriented, which basically means what you're looking at on the map is the same direction. So for example, at Pohik, you're going to be standing in the parking lot. And if I remember correctly, sort of the main park road, I believe goes generally east-west. So you'll be able to stand in the parking lot and practice orienting your map. Because if you do it correctly, you can be like, oh, check-in is behind me, right? The water is to the right if your map is oriented correctly. On race day, things will be a little bit crazy, but if you want to practice and come find me before the race start, I'll give you like a super quick tutorial. But it's an incredibly important skill because the reason why it's relevant in sort of like all races, you get to a trail and you forget where exactly you maybe are. And you say, do I go left or do I go right on the trail, for example? If you orient the map correctly, it'll really help you figure out which way should you be going to find that particular control. If you don't know how to orient the map and you weren't paying attention, it might be harder. So that would be, excuse me, a skill that I'd say you try out. Once you do it once or twice, you'll know how to do it. And I'd say that's like that's the basis for all map and compass navigation stuff. Everything else that comes after that is based on being able to orient the map correctly. One other little tip I'll give you about map. Who's ever navigating, whether it's yourself or by committee or whatever, who's ever has the map, always know where you are on the map at any given time. So orienteers use this a term or a technique called thumbing. So what that basically means, like say you had the map in your hand, you would put your thumb where you are on the map. And as you're moving, say on foot, for example, you'd slide your finger to the new place. Now it doesn't have to be exact, but the beauty of doing that, one is it helps you focus on where you are on the map and can readjust, be like, hey, wait a minute, I don't think we're in the right spot. It also makes it a lot quicker every time you look down at the map to kind of look at, okay, do I need to go left or do I need to go right? If you didn't have your thumb on the map, you'd have to find, okay, where am I again? Like you'd have to find it every single time. And trust me, it's a lot faster just to be like, oh, yep, we're by my thumb, right? So orienting a map to the north, true north, is a great skill to know how to do. And thumbing is sort of like another basic orienteering technique, which is super useful. Not when you're riding a bike, obviously, but when you're on foot, it's a really effective way to know where you're at. And one last thing I'll reiterate: if you're new, one of the most important things you could think about is always know where you are on the map, even if it means slowing down. So in the very beginning, like if you're like, hey, I'm on this trail, like take time to know, okay, I'm on this trail, this is where I am on the map, and it's going to do this and turn around. It pays often 9 times out of 10 to go slower in the beginning to sort of learn and orient yourself to the map and kind of how things look than it is to go fast and get lost. Trust me, I've gotten lost a million times, and more often than not, if I just slowed down and took my time, I'd be in a better position than I was if I didn't do that. So let's see. I'm going to close with a couple thoughts on teams, and then we'll kind of wrap up. So if you're racing with a team, the most important suggestion I could have to you is have a conversation with your team about the expectations that everyone has for the race. And it could be as simple as, hey, are we doing this for fun, or are we going to win? Understanding what your teammates' expectations are before race day is very important. Whether you're a family, whether you're racing with your boyfriend or girlfriend, your husband, wife, or just some friends, making sure everybody's expectations are the same is huge, hugely important. Another thing is ask who's navigating and knows who's navigating. I will tell you, I've been in races and I'm a pretty good navigator. I'm not certainly the best, but I can hold my own. And I was racing with a really good navigator, and we both had maps for this race. And at one point, he thought I was navigating, and I thought he was navigating, and it didn't work out too well. So clearly communicating with your team about who's doing what is really important. And the last piece is, and I mentioned this before, is really not only keep after yourself, but also keep an eye on your teammates. If someone's tired, slow down. Carry their backpack, make sure they have water, give them a cookie if they're hungry, whatever. There's no food that tastes better in a race than your teammates' food, because they have something that maybe you don't have. Very true in longer races, but even in a 5-hour race, if you're carrying Oreos and your teammate doesn't have an Oreo cookie, that Oreo cookie may make the difference in your teammates' event. So clearly communicate, help each other out. Set expectations is the best advice I can give you, especially as you get into adventure racing. And the longer the event, the more important those things become. So I think that's all I wanted to cover. Does anybody have any questions before we sign off? You can put them in the chat. Cool. Well, I really appreciate your time, and thanks so much for hanging out with me for an hour and a half talking about something that I really enjoy. And I will see many of you on the 19th or 20th. And the people who are doing the On Your Own course, look for something in the mail from me. I will let you know when it's coming. I did have one other question. It was a really good one about rain or shine. So the race is rain or shine. The only thing that may get impacted if we get a ton of rain is the mountain biking section. Typically, we don't like to ride on trails that are too wet because we don't want to damage them. We have a plan for that, but that would be the only change. But if it's raining, we're going to paddle in the rain and you're going to trek in the rain. You just might bike maybe a little someplace different. But yeah, rain or shine. Okay, well, have a great night, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. I will send out like the pre-race email probably Monday is when I'll get it out. It'll have a little bit more details in it. I'm also recording this session, so if any of your teammates didn't see it and they have trouble sleeping, they can watch it before they go to bed one night or something. I'll put it out there. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Oh, and I forgot, the people here, I want to get this on record. The last thing I was going to show you is resources. Let me just do this real quick. It'll take 3 minutes. Okay, so I'm sharing my screen. A couple things I want to show you. So I mentioned the Adventure Racing World Series. So these are international races. This is just cool to look at and find out like where races are around the world. There's really cool videos. This is Nathan Fave. He was the guy who won Eco Challenge, right? That's his teammate. So he's like the best orienteer in the whole world. So check out that. It's really cool. It's just arworldseries.com. USARA is the U.S. Adventure Racing Association. So USARA is under brand new leadership this year. So a guy named Mike Garrison is now the executive director of it. He's got a board made up of really awesome people and really great adventure racers and good friends of mine, and they are going to do wonderful things for USARA. So USARA is something to watch going forward. And it's a good place. There's lots of resources. There's all sorts of cool eco-challenge coverage and all sorts of stuff. The last one is ARC, which is the Adventure Racing Cooperative. And that website is just arcooperative.org. Lots of great resources. You can see all the adventure racing promoters that are a part of ARC in some way or other. The best thing I think about the ARC, besides the resources on it, is the list of races. So this will give you a whole bunch of adventure races, Rogaines, stuff like that, all around the country, really North America, no matter what the distance. And so as you're planning like what you want to do next, perhaps, keep this website in mind, because there's all sorts of cool stuff in here. It's a great place to go and look for events. If you're on Facebook, there is an adventure racing teammate finder group, and there's an adventure racing discussion group as well. You can search for those and find those. There's been a great flurry of activity lately because of Eco Challenge. So again, Air World Series is just kind of cool to look at. USARA, Adventure Racing Cooperative, and those two Facebook groups are great places to check out. And with that, I think that'll be the last thing we cover. So again, thank you very much for your time. If you guys have any questions over the next week, feel free to call me, send me a text, or email me. I'm happy to help you guys any way I can get ready for, especially if this is your first race. I want to make it as an adventurous and fun experience as possible. So well, have a great evening, everybody. Thanks again for your time, and have a good rest of your week.